Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's briefing, August 18th. As usual, I'll begin by highlighting some of the engagements of the Prime Minister over the past week. So to begin, on August 11th and 12th were very monumental days for Ethiopia, where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed initiated the beginning of power generation of the second Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam turbine on the 11th, and announced the successful third filling of the dam on the 12th, as you would recall. The two early generator units have a combined capacity of 750 megawatts, and currently over 540 megawatts is being generated and injected to the grid. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, during the commissioning of the second unit, once again has called upon Egypt and Sudan to continue the trilateral negotiations and work towards forging results through cooperation and mutual growth, reiterating that while work that has been done to hold up to 22 billion metric cube of water and generate power from the two units, there has been no harm caused to the lower riparian countries, as the bottom outlets are very clear demonstrations of Ethiopia's no harm principles to its lower riparian countries. On a second activity, August 14th marked the official closing of this year's Green Legacy program, which was held in Dreddawa city. The closing ceremony marked the conclusion of the 4-year target of planting 20 billion seedlings, initiated in 2019 by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. This conclusion ceremony doesn't necessarily mean that the Green Legacy program has concluded. It will continue in subsequent years, but the target that had been set as a national focus, that was the culmination of that program occurred on August 14th. As we recall, it is for the first time in Ethiopia's history of afforestation and reforestation that such a large-scale landscape restoration initiative was launched and achieved more than what had been initially planned. Some remarkable results over the past 4 years to share with you include mushrooming of nurseries throughout the country from around 40,000 when the initiative was launched to more than 121,000 by 2022. Raising different species of seedlings in these nurseries with increasing emphasis given to indigenous types and high-value types like bamboo, which is an occurrence for this year. The third, aimed at making the Green Legacy initiative improve access to food and nutrition. This year alone, more than 270 million seedlings of important fruit species, mainly avocado, mango, and papaya, have been raised in different nurseries throughout the country. Thus far, the average survival rate stands at 84% for seedlings planted nationwide. In the 4 years of this initiative, a total of or more than 767,000 jobs have been created, particularly for women and youth groups. Many youth have established their own businesses in tree seedling production, site management, and other activities as well. And last but not least, as it relates to the Green Legacy initiative, increased public awareness about climate change, natural resource degradation, loss of biodiversity, and its consequences have contributed to a burgeoning green culture nationwide. A third aspect of engagement for the Prime Minister's activities last week include the Free Trade Zone launch. On August 14th, you would recall that the Prime Minister inaugurated the Dreddawa Free Trade Zone. Prior to the inauguration, the Council of Ministers the day before had put into effect the draft policy document of the National Special Economic Zone, which emphasizes the contribution of international and regional trade link to the economic development of the country as important. The Council, in its decision, recognized that it is important to create enabling conditions for Ethiopia to be an active participant and beneficiary in trade relations that are rapidly expanding and developing globally. In this regard, in order to improve the export trade system of Ethiopia, to increase the attractiveness of foreign direct investment, to enhance Ethiopia's export trade capacity, and to create wide employment opportunities in the sector, it was found important to establish a system for the expansion of dry ports, smooth logistic services in the main trade corridors of Ethiopia. Hence the importance of the policy that allows for the establishment of special economic zones. The Dreddawa Free Trade Zone, inaugurated by the Prime Minister the past Sunday, covers an area of 150 square meters in Phase 1 and 4,000 square meter land for future expansion. It has dedicated 20 megawatts electric power supply. It has also dedicated water supply. It's within close proximity to the Dirredawa-Addis Ababa highway. It is situated adjacent to the rail connecting Addis Ababa and Djibouti. The Dirredawa dry port is within a 2.8 kilometer distance. Dirredawa International Airport is within around 25 kilometer distance. The free trade zone has a locational advantage with two major port corridors of 348 kilometers and 507 kilometers respectively from the ports of Djibouti and Berbera. The services offered at the free trade zone range from value-added logistics services to industrial and logistics estate rental, which are complemented with public services and government services in a one-stop service orientation. On a second briefing issue, I will give you key highlights on overall peace and security across the country. And overall national peace and security, multifaceted efforts are being made by the security sector to address outstanding issues as a key priority of the government. We recall the National Security Council statement issued last week evaluating its operational activities nationwide. As it pertains to terrorist activities in the Oromia region, through the concerted efforts of 3 command posts that have been established and joint deployments of federal and regional security forces, key progress is reported to have been made on apprehending members of terrorist cells. In the Amhara region, rule of law measures taken against irregular forces has yielded results as evaluated by the National Security Council. Similarly, the evaluation of the National Security Council of its peace and security efforts in Benshangul region, SNNP region, Somali and Afar regions, as well as Addis Ababa city indicates progress in apprehending criminals, curbing criminal activities, and cleaning the structures of the security sector nationwide. The National Security Council has set forth a direction to continue its operations to diminish the capabilities of terrorists and irregular forces to a level where they are not a threat, to conduct activities that ensure lasting peace by mediating across various groups and involving youth in peace activities. You would notice that there's a lot of consultations and dialogue sessions that are being held in various sections of the country. It has also given a direction to strengthen the judicial bodies and enable them to perform what is required for national peace and security, to take decisive action against economic exploitation, corruption, smuggling, illegal money transfer, and other forms of economic sabotage, and finally to refine the leadership at every level and establish accountability, creating qualified, active, and ready leadership at every level. Moving on to humanitarian response updates, briefly, the data that I have from the National Disaster Risk Management Commission is for the period of July 20th, 2022 to August 9th, 2022. Thus far, for the Tigray region, above 29,000 or close to 30,000 metric tons of food, 31,940 metric tons of non-food items, 300 million birr, above 66,000 liters of fuel, 23.63 metric tons of medicine, 2,096 metric tons of fertilizer have reached Mekelle for distribution to beneficiaries throughout the region. For Amhara and Afar regions, the data that I have, again for the same period specified, July 20th to August 9th, 2022, includes 7,543 metric tons of food to Amhara region beneficiaries that has been dispatched, and close to 3,000 metric tons of food to Afar region beneficiaries that are still in need, which has also been dispatched. Last but not least, the Peace Committee has yesterday unveiled a peace proposal that it has deliberated upon and adopted. You would note that in the statement that was released yesterday and the consultation that had been had with the key sections of the diplomatic community, the peace proposal has got a three-pronged proposal. Firstly, it proposes for peace talks to happen within the coming weeks towards an agreed ceasefire. Secondly, it proposes to undertake an in-depth political dialogue between the parties leading towards a settlement. And thirdly, it proposes for any other pending issues to be addressed through a national dialogue. This proposal by the Peace Committee of the federal government is another demonstration of the government's continued commitment to peace and for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. It puts into perspective that the people of Tigray, affected communities in Afar and Amhara region, as a consequence of the devastations, need respite at this moment. It establishes that talks must be without any preconditions because Ethiopians in the Tigray region need not continue being prisoners of TPLF's own political interests. It is cognizant of TPLF's continued forced conscription of youth in the Tigray region. It is cognizant of TPLF's accumulation of weaponry through channels masquerading as humanitarian assistance and through other means. It is cognizant of the illegal flow of foreign and local currency being funneled into TPLF's coffers to finance another altercation. It is cognizant of the siphoning of humanitarian assistance and fuel reserves towards combatants instead of intended beneficiaries within the Tigray region. It is cognizant of the actors that are aiding and abating the TPLF's affront to peace. In spite of all of these, the posture of the government remains that of peaceful engagement and a resolution of this conflict in a peaceful manner. The agenda for peace has been at the forefront by the government before the war broke out. You would notice that. The call for peace was being made by the government during the war through many gestures that had been made. And the calls for peace, for a peaceful resolution continue to be made at this moment, despite there not being a shred of interest for peace by TPLF. Despite this, there are still those for whom the image of TPLF as an underdog is compelling and who continue to propagate this misleading narrative. The issue of restoration of services in particular comes up again and again as if there is one single on and off button or switch that is centrally located. This is a particularly dangerous and erroneous view of how service that is disrupted due to conflict and related damage within the region is administered. The government has made it clear on several occasions to partners as well as to the public that the security and administrative arrangements within the Tigray region need to be cleared and put in place to facilitate technical repair work on the ground in Tigray region to restore these said services. Hence, an operable and enabling environment is essential for such technical work to be undertaken on the ground. And at the moment, with a very vocally belligerent and illegally armed group operating at its own whim and refusing to accept peace talks, the required enabling and secure environment is lacking for the restoration of services. If TPLF genuinely cares for the well-being of Ethiopians in the Tigray region, then there should be publicly asked by various international community actors to accept the peace agenda and sit for talks instead of looking for excuses to avoid these peace talks. The government of Ethiopia once again affirms it is ready at any time and at any place suggested to engage in peace talks under the auspices of the African Union-led process. So with these initial remarks, I will open it up to key questions that you have as it pertains to the briefing that has just been provided. Okay, we'll start with Iskander, one over there, and Galkidan.
Thank you very much, Billani. On the points you alluded to regarding the peace talks, TPLF accused Ethiopian troops of actively provoking its forces in various fronts. It also criticizes the federal government of defying its promises to take measures aimed at creating conducive environment for possible peace negotiations. I was wondering if you could react to this. If I could add one more question. The head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom, describes the situation in Tigray as the worst humanitarian crisis, also mentioning the lack of access to basic services and also access to humanitarian assistance. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Skander. On your first question of an attack, I think the Ethiopian government has demonstrated on several occasions the confidence building measures that it has taken to facilitate peace and to create an enabling environment and condition for the peaceful resolution of this conflict. So this narrative and this rhetoric that keeps coming from the other side is no less than a mechanism to deflect from the desire not to engage in a peaceful manner. But the humanitarian truce that had been enacted by the federal government is still in place, regardless of government statements on the humanitarian assistance that is flowing to the Tigray region. Various partners are also confirming and attesting to the fact that there is free flow of humanitarian assistance reaching Mekelle with regards to intended beneficiaries. I have shared with you some bottlenecks in that regard. So this is no less than a deflection when it comes to not wanting to engage in these peace talks, which the government has on several occasions said is ready to engage in. On your second question with regards to the statement made, the comment is one among many unethical ones that has been made by the WHO Director General and is not surprising. Using the race card and one's multilateral position to garner the sympathy of the global north for personal partisan politics is quite unbecoming of such a high-profile position. We have no doubt that the United Nations will review the continued breach of the UN's oath of office by the WHO Director General, wherein the oath of office itself clearly requires UN staff to act with impartiality and independence, which several of these kind of comments have breached. If the WHO Director General wishes to continue amplifying the rhetoric of a designated terrorist organization, it is advisable to recuse himself of a high-level global position.
Thank you very much. To bring you back to the issue of basic services in Tigray, there have been reports that there have been reports that the Tigrayan forces saying that they could guarantee any technical staff that could be appointed by the federal government in the efforts to bring these basic services in the region. So the first, what's your reaction to that? And in addition to that one, particularly in relation to the current efforts of these peace talks, on the side of the government, is there any particular time frame in which these services will begin to be restored in the region?
Okay, thank you, Kalkida. On basic services, I think I have articulated clearly what the challenges are. A simple piece of paper guaranteeing that the federal government can resume services unabated doesn't really provide the guarantees necessary. As I had mentioned, this is not an off and on switch button that is centrally located. It requires mobilizing, number one, it requires mobility to begin with into the region. It requires mobilizing various offices to actually have an on-ground presence. It requires communication. It requires working harmoniously with counterparts on the other part as well. In the event or in the situation where you have a group that has refused to engage or nominate individuals to engage in talks, the required operating environment or the enabling environment is not there. How do you engage on resuming or working towards restoration of services that have been affected by conflict when there is not a party that is willing to engage on the mechanisms of how to go about this? So that basic requirement on the ground needs to be facilitated. It requires setting up offices there. It requires counterparts on the other end also to engage peacefully in that manner. With regards to a time frame, again, I refer back to the Peace Committee's yesterday's statement where they are willing to engage at any time as of today to sit down and come to a conclusive agreement on an immediate ceasefire.
Thank you. My first question is, as we all know, federal government has a responsibility to maintain peace and restore service in Tigray and maintain peace in the other part of the Ethiopia. But with regard to peace talk, the TPLF has listed preconditions, and federal government is saying peace talk to start without any preconditions. With this back and forth, the peace talk might be delayed. And is there any possibility, federal government would use, if this back and forth continues, to restore service or to maintain peace in Tigray and the other part of the country? The other thing is with regard to settling, last year the federal government was saying considerable amount of seedling will be given to neighboring states like countries like Kenya, Djibouti, and Eritrea. But this year, there was no anything given to these countries. And is there any, last year we heard that Prime Minister Abiy said it will be continued to provide seedling to these countries as a part of friendship and fighting like climate change cooperation. What happened to this year? Because there is no any seedling given to these countries. Thank you.
Okay. On your first question, I think I have sufficiently responded to that. Indeed, maintaining peace and maintaining or provision of basic services to all citizens in all parts of the country is the duty and responsibility of the government. This is something that the federal government has often been saying, and in fact has enacted various confidence-building measures towards ensuring that Ethiopians within the Tigray region do receive the required necessary assistance to continue their livelihoods. In fact, you would notice that fertilizer distribution is also going on, and this has been an interest of the federal government to ensure that productivity is unhampered as well for individuals living in that region to sustain their livelihoods. Again, when it comes back to restoration of services, it is the responsibility of the federal government, but we should not have a skewed narrative of this. The federal government is saying that the people of Tigray should not be met with any preconditions when it comes to securing their peace and stability in that region. The TPLF is the one that is coming with a bucket list of preconditions for peace to prevail. So that needs to be checked. It needs to be checked by the international community. It needs to be checked by the people of Tigray. It needs to be checked by media as well in terms of exploring who is a bottleneck or what kind of issues are bottlenecks for peace to prevail and for restoration of services to be happening in the country. The government is ready. It's saying that there is no preconditions to have these talks, but important is to ensure that there is a ceasefire that happens. Important is the foundations and the building blocks and the elements that are required to ensure that the basic services are deployed within the region are met as well. So I don't think these are conditions. This is also asking for a secure environment for its staff, federal operational staff, to be able to operate within the region. Any other questions? Tabitha?
Thank you. It's still with the peace talks. Does the Ethiopian government welcome any other body besides the African Union to mediate in the peace talks? And second, grievances are being voiced by people traveling from different places in the Amhara region to Addis Ababa, citing transportation difficulty due to vigorous searches at security checkpoints. What caused this, and what can the government do to ease the hurdles of such travelers and restore smooth transportation? Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. The Ethiopian government, as it relates to the peace talks, is committed to an AU-led process. It has been consistent in that declaration. As it pertains to others supporting the African Union, this is at the discretion of the African Union, but the Ethiopian government is primarily supporting or requiring that that the peace process is led in an AU-led process. So if the High Representative of the African Union, if the African Union itself requires technical and financial assistance from other partners, it is at their discretion to make that happen. Your second question, indeed, there has been some challenges that have been encountered. I believe these challenges have already been resolved. There might be some remnants of it, but this is something that also is being looked at by the two regions. If you would recall, during the TPLF's incursions into the Amhara region, one of the biggest challenges is the decimation of a lot of facilities, but at the same time, the theft of a lot of government property, including proliferation of stolen stamps. So these security checkpoints that have been put in place are made to guarantee that there is no utilization of fake IDs and fake personas to create an insecure environment within the capital city. Thank you, Tabitha. If there's no other questions, one more and we'll wrap up.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I will go back on the statement by the Peace Committee last night. I wanted a clarification. The Peace Committee talks about a ceasefire in order for starting restoration of basic service. Is the ceasefire a necessary condition to this restoration, meaning there won't be any restoration before any ceasefire? And is this one enough condition? I mean, once a ceasefire, formal ceasefire is signed, restoration basic service can start.
I think there is a mix-up again, and I'm glad you asked that question for clarity, because the government is not putting any conditions or preconditions for the restoration of services. Those are two separate items. What was stated yesterday is the Peace Committee's willingness to engage in a peaceful resolution of the conflict as soon as possible. The first one being, let the peace talks happen within the coming weeks, immediately concluding towards an agreed ceasefire. What does this mean? The background to this is that over the past weeks, as we've continued to see, there is forced conscription of various youth in the Tigray region. There is an amplification of the war drums again. There is continued threat and belligerence from the TPLF. What we're saying that the people of the Tigray region, the people of the Amhara and Afar region that are also neighboring this region cannot afford another altercation like this. So it is immediate that this commitment for a ceasefire needs to happen. The basic services has got nothing to do with this, or the restoration of basic services is not predicated, or there is no precondition that has been set on that. So we need to make it very clear as well in the narrative. For the basic services to happen, we are saying that a conducive operable environment needs to happen, which guarantees the safety of federal service providers to operate freely and with guarantees that their safety is facilitated within the region. Thank you very much.